Give me a second, guys.
That's an.
Make sure drop a like and sub was watching. The audio not coming for this. I'm out of battery or what? Huh? Why is my mouse not showing up there? The cursor is not showing up. Is there some setting? What? Alt? Still not showing, man. Make sure drop a like and so. Bro, the crosser's not coming. Huh. Where the hell am I supposed to play? Wait, give me a second. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about him. What the hell? I really don't know. Huh? How the hell do I actually see the cursor, bro? There has to be something, no? Oh, found it. Give me a second, guys.
Which are incredibly narrow, but there is a bit of room there. It can sometimes create a bit of drama at the start, and it gives you an opportunity to pass around the outside as well. We've seen Fernando Alonso with some strong moves around the outside in recent times. And that's the key overtaking spot around this circuit. Anywhere else, bit of a risk.
Yeah, and we had 188 of those in last year's race, which is a record for Formula One. That's another one of my facts.
188. It certainly felt like 188. It was a gloriously exhausting Grand Prix in the commentary box, let alone the cockpit. How was it on the pit wall?
I don't want to talk about it. I was in P2.
You were in P2.
And then I got overtaken.
We joke on you, having gone through the mayhem. If you weren't with us last year, you can catch up on the highlights anytime you like. F1 TV. The entire archive for you in recent times, but we had rain at the start. It absolutely hammered down, and you're in a great position at the start, Ruth. Go on, tell everyone a little bit about it.
So, one of the great things about this track is before they extended the pit lane boxes, which they've done, now we have an extra 18 metres, so we now have more pit lane boxes. Last year, all the boxes were very, very close. You couldn't pit both of your cars on the same lap. Inter to dry at the start of the race. We opted to box our lovely driver, Joe, along with a couple of other people. At the end of lap 1, worked really well. We were in P2. We were going to get a podium, and then we weren't quite quick enough to hold on to it. We got overtaken, and it was particularly painful. So, yeah, I do remember there was 188 overtakes because quite a few of them were on me.
The start was great. Got yourself into the position. Whilst Ruth tries not to remember last year, we're going to send it downstairs to Willbox.
I just wanted to fill you in on what's going on Max Verstappen's car after he brought it into the pits, and the answer is not a lot. To be completely honest with you, they had a look at the floor on the right-hand side, but that's really all that they've been looking at. They chucked the pipes in the side and refilled it with some fuel to send him on another run. But no big panics, no big work for a driver who says he's just not quite got the feel in it at the moment. Let's not forget, though, this is a setup, the high downforce setup, that he wasn't altogether happy with when he last ran it. And having seen those upgrades not really work on the Red Bull of late, big decisions down here at Red Bull at the moment, whether they stick with the car as is or revert back to previous specs. So Verstappen just sitting in his car for the moment. No big work going on in the car, and the busyness in the garage suggests to me that Sergio Perez will be joining him pretty soon.
Thank you, Will. Lewis Hamilton's just on the fastest first sector of anyone so far. As we continue to rubber in this track from earlier on, 44 minutes to go.
And one interesting observation is that right now that hard C1 tyre is actually looking very strong. It's got a little bit more warm up, so the first laps are about 0.6 off. But at the moment, it's very close. If anything, you know, with some kind of, you know, you do need to go to the numbers to get the exact one, so it'll give you something like a 10th faster, which is not crazy, because actually last year here, the C2 wasn't quite as strong as the C1, so it was a soft, hard, dominant race. So it's interesting to see how it is likely to be similar, but we'll find out more when we get to the high fuel runs.
Yeah, when you look at Albon and Tsunoda 7th and 8th in that machinery, that seems like it's a very strong tyre at this stage. What's it like as a strategist when you feel like you've played all your races and either the car's not good enough to execute your strategy to points, or the driver doesn't do a good enough job? Do you get frustrated when you feel like you've done everything and yet somehow you're still coming away with nothing?
Yes, I do. Why would you ask that? That's an awful question. No, it's heartbreaking. I feel like this. Can we just talk about the on-track? Oh, thank you, Team Radio.
I hope that wasn't someone's thought. I just ran over there.
It was a cone, George Russell. You're off the hook. And into the wall goes the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg. 3 times off in the session that began the weekend. The 4th visit is into the barriers. Red flag is out.
We really don't know what's happening there.
Off at turn 1, I believe, as well. And yeah, he's made it all the way to the barrier. So has he tried to turn in and is sort of overcorrected? He's pointing at a very odd angle there on the outside. We've seen plenty of drivers go through that gravel. We've seen the best of them have big lockups and nearly enter the gravel. We've seen Hülkenberg find every gravel trap so far this morning, but this time he's found one that he's not going to get out of.
It's gone a long way. There is a big gravel trap. You're going to see it now as the shot pulls out. He's travelled a long way to the barrier there, but it's the angle that he's in the barrier that's confusing.
I'm surprised he's gone sideways and found it all the way to the wall through the gravel. Your apex speed isn't that high in that corner. You can see where the gravel's come over the access road there. It's already pitched sideways. He's out of the car, and probably the contact shouldn't be too big, but he has obviously done significant enough damage that he can't drive out of it. Let's have a look.
So we're going on board Tarzan corner, turn number 1 that we're heading to.
It's a massive rear lock. So he just never did slow it down enough, because as soon as he's hit the brakes there, the rear's just gone. We've seen so many drivers have big front locks. That's when you get the big smoky puffs off your front right typically, and every single moment we've seen so far has been that. But that time, Hülkenberg just hammered on the brake, the left pedal, and it's gone straight into a rear lock, which gives you that huge instability, and it's an immediate snap and crash.
That was really
Going on board once again.
really sad for Haas. Not a huge impact. He should be out there in F1.
Don't know what happened there.
Yep, I don't know either, Nico. Yeah, we're having a look.
Just the rear completely locked up.
Yep.
I'm braking.
Nicely summarised by the German driver. This is the closest thing he's got to a home race. This is the closest to his hometown of Emmerich in Germany, and he's out of the car, and that is the most important thing, but not what he needed in terms of logging data. He's across the track. It gives us an opportunity under this red flag with the clock ticking down to send it to Sam Collins for a deeper dive at the updates that Red Bull have brought to this weekend.
Yeah, hi guys, thanks for that. That was a weird off, wasn't it? I'm interested to hear Jolyon a bit more from him on that one, because car just rotated. But look, Red Bull, Red Bull introduced a new package at the Hungarian Grand Prix for high downforce circuits like Zandvoort, and it didn't really work. They've introduced, you heard Will talking about it in Free Practice 1, they've introduced a couple of really tiny elements to try to make this package work. The first one of this is this weird vertical element, and I say it's a bit weird because it's a strange shape, little wing element, alongside the rear of the halo. Following Ferrari's lead, they've got a little element in this part of the car as well, just trying to condition the flow, trying to get the airflow doing what they want a little bit downstream. But I think more interesting is what they're doing around their rear view mirrors. They've got this little new section on the inner face of the main mirror housing that's clearly designed for aerodynamic purposes, not to support the mirror, but you forget those drag reduction mirrors they've been running for a little while. They've gone away, they've gone out of fashion a little bit, but they're just trying to optimize the flow over that rear bodywork and get the most out of that performance. But this tiny little detail here, I think, is really quite important, and I think you're going to see a lot of teams trying to copy it as they try to get those parts working. But I'm hearing that down in the pit lane, we've got Will Buxton looking at the Haas garage. So, Will, let's see what you got.
Thank you very much, Sam. Nico Hulkenberg's just walked past us and back into the garage. We're going to go and find him in a minute, but I want to point something out to you and why Nico Hulkenberg and Haas might be feeling quite lucky right now. Look at that, old front wing. Look at Kev's car, old front wing. If we move further through to the back of the garage, we'll go through here. Those two wings at the back, old front wings, right at the back there, which means Nico Hulkenberg was running the brand new front wing on his car. So going in sideways and having that light tap up to the wall might actually have saved the bacon of the team's big upgrade for this weekend. That brand new nose, that brand new front wing, which attaches itself all the way down onto that first bottom main plane of the car. An unknown reason why Nico had that little spin down there. He's just standing up against the side here, having a little chat through with Gary, I think, about exactly what did happen. If we can get through there, mate, you can have a little look. There's Nico. Just standing up there, talking about exactly what did go down there. But he will be hoping, the team will be hoping, that that very light little knock against the wall will have saved the front wing as we get a green light and cars back out on track.
Thank you, Will. As we get that green light at the end of the pit lane, and now it is over to team and driver. Ruth Buscombe-Davey, talk us through what we're going to see on track.
Yeah, so on the sequence in FP2, it's normally pretty standardised. You both have to run 2 tyres. Normally, one of those is a medium and a hard, and then everybody typically runs 1 soft. In terms of the timings, we're now in the soft window. Now, everybody's doing qualifying runs. They've done a qualifying run on a medium and a hard, which isn't obviously completely representative because most of the times you're doing your qualifying on the soft tyre. And now this is your qualifying simulation. And given that FP3 looks really rather wet and qualifying looks wet, maybe dry, this is your only real representation of what the car could be like in qualifying. Then normally after the quali runs, they'll put fuel in the car, typically about 110 kilograms, and then they'll run a high fuel simulation on the compound they're most interested in finding out information on, which also gives us a bit of an indication of what people are thinking the raced tyre, aka the tyre they're going to spend most of the race on, is.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Bit of high vis going on Oscar Piastri's car. The front there, you can see. So that's being applied before he goes out there. We've got Max Verstappen on a soft tyre coming out of the 14th and final corner, the bank corner that leads him onto the main straight. In the modern era, Verstappen has been the driver that has won every single Dutch Grand Prix since it returned to the Formula One calendar. 36 years they waited to get a Grand Prix back in motion. He was able to bring all the fans, and this is a thrilling racetrack. Jolyon Palmer's going to talk you around the lap.
So Max did a very good opening lap on the medium tyre. Then he's been in the garage since having his lock up, his oversteer moment at this next corner, and now he's unleashed onto a soft. We'll see how much time he can find, but he has done the fastest first sector of all. About a tenth quicker than Lewis Hamilton now, sweeping through the second of the right-hand trio of corners, slowing it down and fighting the rear once again, exiting turn 9. The wind not helping certainly, but the Red Bull looking slightly difficult to drive coming out of that corner compared to a few others. So Norris is on a flyer as well behind. We'll get a comparison of those two on this soft tyre run now. As Verstappen gets it slowed down, the brakes working a little bit more smoothly for Verstappen on this lap than he had before. Final corner, turn 13, run loads of curb on the exit. and get that DRS open and through the final bank corner. Easy, flat out. Verstappen is up on Norris through 2 sectors. In fact, they're neck and neck through 2 sectors. Verstappen goes to the top of the times, but let's see what Norris does.
We go on board with the gyro cam on the banking for the one-time Grand Prix winner. As Max Verstappen currently fastest, Norris changes that. 25 thousandths of a second between the McLaren and the Red Bull. Real-time comparison between the top two earlier on in practice and the top two in the World Championship.
Perez is on a lap as well, on a soft tyre in the other Red Bull, so let's keep an eye on what Checo does in this session. There's quite a big gap between the two Red Bulls earlier on. Now we're in like-for-like dry conditions. That's a gap that Perez is going to want to get right down. Albon was quick earlier on as well. He's just half a second away from Norris. Perez does jump up into third place, but he is over half a second away from his teammates. So plenty of space for others to fill. Sargent jumps to fourth, but what about Albon?
Well, Albon was fourth last year on the grid to equal his personal best in qualifying, and the Williams driver displaces his teammate. He's always been quicker than Sargent in Grand Prix qualifying, and in FP2 he's marginally ahead. I think Sargent, who was in the top 10 of qualifying here last year, will be pleased with that lap. Fourth and fifth for Williams.
Piastri next up. Here we go. His teammates top of the times, quarter of a tenth up on Max Verstappen, couple of hundredths, and there he's going to jump out of the way for Oscar now, who has the DRS open and will attack the final sector. Half a tenth up on Lando Norris. Got to get the car stopped and get to the first apex, and then this is a nice cambered corner, 180 degrees round, which gives a short burst to the final corner at turn 13. Smoothly getting on the gas, opening that DRS once again, flashing through, picking up a bit of a slipstream. Can Piastri go top?
Let's find out. He can, by just shy of 0.2 of a second. Oscar Piastri, who won his maiden race in Budapest in strange circumstances with the team tactics, but has got stronger and stronger and stronger. And it is a 1-2 for McLaren. Let's now head to Will Buxton in the pit lane.
And it is not happy news if you are a Carlos Sainz or Ferrari fan. The car up on the jacks, and if we look down towards the back, you see all of that fluid pouring out underneath the gearbox. Gearbox issue for Carlos Sainz. Session is over.
Well, that is enormous disappointment for Ferrari, and with Formula One in this ultra-competitive state, where you've got four constructors winning multiple races this year, very unusual situation to have it that competitive. You can see with the points scored in the last 5 races how things have changed since the start of the year, but any loss of track time incredibly detrimental to the rest of your weekend.
Particularly for Ferrari, who need to try and find everything they can to get themselves back into that top 3 fight. Leclerc's on an outlap, and we'll see what he can do. He was very strong in Belgium, Charles Leclerc, bucked the recent trend of Ferrari being slightly adrift of the rest and managed to cling on for a podium once Russell was demoted. We'll see what he can do. We'll see what the Mercedes duo can do as well. Remember, Hamilton was the fastest man on that medium. He's now shuffled down to 7th, but everyone's finding heaps of time on the soft tyre.
Fernando Alonso, another driver who seems to always come alive at this racetrack, and he is bringing it round the final corner. 2-time world champion, is about to cut the beam, go up to 4th. He goes ahead of Kevin Magnussen. Very tight out there. Tsunoda goes P4.
Russell flying, and Hamilton's going even quicker. Russell's on the fastest middle sector. Hamilton's done the fastest first sector. Here's George Russell coming out of turn 12. 1 corner to go for him. Getting right up onto that white line, maximising the track width and going wider than anyone on the exit as well. Really squeezing everything out of this is George, heading towards the top spot of Piastri.
I got it. George Russell with the fastest time. Lewis Hamilton in close proximity, but with a couple of corners to go. We join Lewis Hamilton. His best result around this circuit is 2nd place. It is one of 3 circuits on the calendar where he hasn't taken a victory in his Formula One career. And Hamilton trying to get on terms with Russell. Can he do it? His teammate is still ahead. So is Oscar Piastri. P3 for Lewis Hamilton.
Mercedes well and truly in the fight this weekend. I think the conditions suit them quite nicely. It's not too hot. It's a track they've gone well at in the past, and a bit of breeze, they can handle that as well. So 1 and 3. McLaren looking good, Verstappen there. That's pretty much your typical 5. Let's see what Charles Leclerc can do. Can he show that Ferrari have got some pace? He started a flying lap, but has backed off it in the middle sector, so maybe he'll go again on the next tour.
Looking at Daniel Ricciardo, teammate to Yuki Tsunoda in the RB, who crashed here. Just a reminder of what we saw earlier on in FP1 when he broke his hand. And Liam Lawson got a last-minute call-up, had a string of races. As a result, he is out there at the moment. We're just captioning that. Half an hour to go. Still yet to see the pace of Charles Leclerc. We will not see the pace for Carlos Sainz. And there is Liam Lawson, the driver who was so pleased with the run of races that he had last year. Understandably found it quite tough that he wasn't going to be on the grid for 2024, but there was always an underlying assumption that he would definitely be on the grid for 2025. Some in that team have been saying that's going to be the case within the Red Bull setup, but still no news of his future for next season.
Check the gearbox. Oh, so something with the gearbox. Copy. Stayed in 7th gear.
So Carlos Sainz radioing in an issue with the gearbox, being told to stay in 7th place, and we switch to Charles Leclerc.
1 quarter to go for Leclerc. This is his second flying lap on this set of tyres. He aborted the last one. It's not an optimal run for the other Ferrari. Can he get up towards the sharp end? No, 9th.
That is not great for the simulation if you consider that it's slightly behind everyone else out there on the circuit, but also when you look on the timing page, behind Tsunoda, Alonso and Magnussen.
And he's just off in all 3 sectors. That middle sector's a huge chunk in the high-speed corners. It's not a very pretty picture, that, for Ferrari.
Yep, but it is a pretty picture if you're a fan of Team Brackley, because Mercedes, for the 3rd year in the row, are looking exceptionally fast. So that gap between Russell and Piastri's 600s, that's pretty much all in turn 7. 7 kph faster than the McLaren in high speed. So it does look, at this stage, like the Mercedes still has the edge over the McLaren in the high speed corners. McLaren versus Red Bull, it's those corners that involve all of the curb riding. So turn 10 exit and turn 13. But it is so close at the top, and again, conditions just about to change again for tomorrow.
Gasly pushing the extremities at turn 3. I thought he was going to send it in deep, as we saw Piastri and then Ricciardo do last year, the way he was attacking that banked corner at Hugenholtz, and he's backed off it after that.
Yeah, Gasly finishing the Belgian Grand Prix after a tough run where he wasn't able to find the flag, and he'd gone on a nice run of point scoring, 4 in a row, and then didn't even take the lights at Silverstone, retired in Budapest, and was outside of the points, but at least saw the checkered flag at the last round in Belgium. 4-point scores for his season so far. None better than 9th place for Gasly, who will remain with the team moving into 2025. And the news at the start of the day that friend of the show, I have to lose that when he becomes a full-time driver, Jack Doohan, becomes one of the 20 on the grid next year when he will make his Formula 1 debut at his home race.
But will he not become a friend of the show then? Will he?
You got to be neutral.
Forget his roots. He'll forget his roots.
He did promise in Montreal that he would do a full post show with either Will Buxton or Laura Winter next year.
We'll hold him to it.
And we're going to hold it to him, and we're going to make sure he does it after the exhaustion of a Grand Prix.
Yeah, after Singapore. Just
yeah,
the least we deserve, isn't it?
We'll write that one in. But that's the main news. 3rd place finisher in last year's Formula 2 Championship. His season, there's so many nuances with Formula 2, but they had a fundamental issue there. They didn't get on top of it, didn't understand it, didn't fix it, whatever the right phraseology is. They needed the in-season test. Once they got past the in-season test at Barcelona, Jack Doohan was a contender week in, week out on his way to that 3rd place in the Formula 2 Championship.
How do you rate Doohan in terms of Formula 2 graduates heading to Formula 1? You've obviously commentated on pretty much his entire career in recent years.
Yeah, deserves a shot. without doubt, deserves a shot. Runner-up in the Formula 3 Championship when he competed in that. That was in his second season. Graduated, was a multiple race winner. And then you move into that next year of the second tier, Formula 2, and there was big expectation on mounting that title challenge. It didn't get off to the easiest start, and he came roaring back. And I think the encouraging thing for him, so you look at how close the Constructors' Championship battle has been, the encouraging thing, I think, for him is when the setup was dialed in, wasn't really a contest. The races where he was quick, the feature races where there's no reverse grid, it's line up where you qualify, that's where he wouldn't really be in a race with anyone. When the setup was nailed, when it was his type of circuit, he left the field behind, and I think that will encourage him. Also, we hear a lot about the testing that might do behind the scenes. I think the numbers that Alpine saw in testing, like Mercedes doing with Kimi Antonelli, they were hugely encouraged.
Just check the floor after exit curb, turn 13. A firm.
Yeah, we saw that live on his soft tyre run, just taking a bit more out of that than anyone else was George. And you see the sparks trailing the Mercedes as he jumped on the gas out of that corner. I think Jack's CV is not the most eye-catching CV of drivers. When you consider your Piastris, your Russells, your Leclercs, even Verstappen, the fact that he was so young and managed to deliver a lot of strong results, they were all eye-catching. But the interesting thing is he's been embedded with Alpine now for a while, and as you said, they've run him in testing. He's been in the simulator a lot. The simulator sometimes I think you can take with a pinch of salt because it's very different to when you're actually strapped in and there's a bit more jeopardy there and your natural elements to deal with. But when he's been in the car, and he's done some direct comparisons with Mick Schumacher, who's also in the Alpine overall roster, and they've been assessing Schumacher and Doohan back-to-back in tests, and they've gone with Jack. And Mick had a decent... Oh, that felt like a lot of speed that Lando was taking in there.
That's the joy of that gyro cam, climbing the banking at turn 3.
Yeah, Mick had a decent run in Formula 1 as well. Dispatched Mazepin. I thought he was pretty solid against Kevin Magnussen as well at Haas. And if Alpine is seeing that Jack Doohan is a stronger contender, I think that speaks good volumes for Jack to have a crack in Formula 1.
Yeah, lots of testing with old Formula 1 machinery that you are allowed to do within the rules. He was doing that most recently at Spa, so after we packed up and left town after the Belgian Grand Prix, he was doing a test there. Stoffel Van Dorn was also doing that. It was a Pirelli tyre test as well, and they've done that at multiple racetracks. Ruth, you've been in the situation of offering your opinion about who should join a team and who shouldn't join a team. Tell us about the recruitment process.
Well, I never offered an opinion. I offered a series of painstakingly prepared numbers.
I love it.
Because that's the job of your strategy department, is to go through and basically try and find quantitative ways of comparing apples and pears, because you never normally get a beautiful comparison between, you know, a rookie, maybe an experienced driver, maybe a driver that's got 1 or 2 seasons. And the numbers don't tell the whole story, but they kind of help put part of the picture together for the top level management, your team principals, to make that ultimate decision. So we try to compare, let's say, how their performance was versus a driver, and then how that driver then fared against somebody else, in order to be able to try to paint a kind of picture of how a driver might be expected to perform. But it works 80% of the time. Yeah, 80% of the time it works all the time, I would say. Sometimes the numbers just don't translate, as you say, because it isn't just about that. There's lots of other factors that make a great Formula 1 driver.
There could be 3 Aussies on the grid next year in Formula 1. That's quite something for a country that have got decent Formula 1 heritage, a Formula 1 champion in their ranks. Do you know the last time 3 Aussies were on the Formula 1 grid?
It's sometime in the 80s, isn't it?
Go on, Ruth.
1976.
Wow, well done.
Did you actually know that, or have you read that off Palmer's laptop?
She looked at the notes.
I was reading it as he was saying it. It was really interesting.
Excellent.
For a bonus point, who were they?
The laptop screen has been shut as Palmer asked this question.
No, I don't know that, actually.
It was Alan Jones, Larry Perkins, and one-time starter, Warwick Brown.
in the Wolf Williams, actually, because it was a really good race result. Wasn't it like one of the first times that like a rookie team did really well?
He was a one-time starter, so I don't know how good it would be.
Maybe not. I know the Wolf Williams team did a really good opening first race because they were our inspiration back when I was at Haas.
Nice reference. Yeah, so it was Frank Williams, and then there was a well-financed chap who came in and took over that entry, and then Williams had to start again. Grand Prix Engineering.
So what was the irony when, in the late 2000s, Williams was brought into by a Wolf? Could have had another Wolf Williams.
Now we're in practice, chat. You can tell that we're preparing for some long runs.
Which are very exciting, JC.
Go on, sell it for us, Ruth.
You don't need to sell it, it's already sold. And we do actually have our first comparison on high fuel between the Red Bull and the McLaren, which, you know, on paper, we just need Mercedes to join the party to do a couple more laps on the medium before we can see there. And right now, it is advantage Norris. So even though that car, we're kind of a bit concerned whether or not the kind of the high downforce package that they chose to run was going to mean they're a bit too draggy on the straights. Doesn't look like that. So at the moment, in terms of race pace, first laps coming through, the medium versus a medium tyre, they are faster, but we have not got that data on the Merc yet.
There's an interest here in terms of the championship positions. The Constructors' Championship we know is looking like a fight between Red Bull hanging on against the charge of the McLarens, and this position really shows exactly that. You've got Perez down in 12th, Verstappen once again trying to fight with the McLarens, but he hasn't got the pace right now to do a huge amount. We know he'll be there or thereabouts on race day. But I think McLaren, in a way, can be quite happy that Mercedes are up there as well, because they're thinking not only constructors, but potentially Norris mounting a challenge in the Drivers' Championship. They might need the likes of Russell and Hamilton to beat Verstappen as well. It'll require Norris to start. He'll have to put together pretty much a perfect second half of the season to mount anything. Let's be clear, he's got a big gap to make up. But with Mercedes becoming more competitive, who knows if Ferrari can be in the mix? Monza's coming up next week. They're always good there. Singapore after that, they're always good there. If McLaren can beat everyone else rising up as well, some big gaps can be caught. So I think it offers a chance to McLaren.
There's an opportunity there. They've been very, very strong. They're trying to score their first Constructors' Championship win this century, which is ridiculous for McLaren. They would have had one in 2007, but the short version is shenanigans took place and they were chucked out of that championship. The drivers were allowed to contend all the way to the end, and Kimi Raikkonen stole it from underneath Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton's nose. So McLaren will be absolutely desperate to take this opportunity, because as this season has shown us, you never know what you're going to get across the board. You've got the same regulations for 2025, and then you've got a complete sea change. You've got a completely different set of regulations coming in for 2026. So you've got to take your opportunity in the next couple of years, especially when McLaren have done all the hard work. They've got themselves back to the front after a decade of struggling. For instance, we came into this season, they hadn't even scored a point in Canada in a decade when they visited there, had a chance to win the Grand Prix.
They hadn't scored a point.
They hadn't scored a point in Canada since 2014 until this year. That's how long it's been that McLaren have been contenders. If you're a knowledgeable Formula One fan, McLaren have the second most wins all time. You always think of them as a front runner, but they have been to the doldrums and then some for their heritage.
It's interesting how they've managed to bounce back, isn't it? With the appointments, first of all, of Zach Brown taking over as CEO, then Andrea Stella now coming in as team principal, following on from Andrea Seidel. And the general rise has been meteoric, really, for a team in modern Formula One terms. For a team, when I was racing Fernando Alonso towards the back end of the field. This was the McLaren Honda days where Fernando wasn't particularly happy with the straight line speed of the car, and they had two world champions in the car. They had Alonso and Button, and then Alonso and Van Dorn, who was one of the most highly rated juniors that never really thrived in Formula One. But they were picking up minor points here or there, and they were even the year after 2018, they were fighting at the back end of the field with Williams, and they were sleeping giants that you thought were a long way away from coming back into being title contenders. But the rise with the leadership of Zach Brown, the major changes that have gone on, they've now got a brilliant driver pairing as well with Norris and Piastri. It's nice to see, and when we speak about Williams and James Vowles still somehow thinking that he's got the best driver lineup on the grid for next year. But it's heartwarming for a team like Williams to look and see McLaren and think, actually, we can rebuild over 3-4 years and get back to being potential podium finishers, maybe a race win.
Now, a bit close between Lance Stroll and the Williams there of Alex Albon, I believe. It was Alex Albon. A little bit close in one of the tightest pit lanes of the year. See another angle of it as they rejoin. Yeah, big thanks to Greg Stewart for taking our practice chat directly to James Vowles in the pen earlier on. Enjoyed that being put to him. And a reminder, you can hear from James Vowles in interview before Grand Prix Sunday. He's our interview before the Dutch Grand Prix in the pre-race show. A packed pre-race show, I'm reliably informed. Which, looking forward to. Looking forward to the build-up. The build-up here, the DJ and the hype ahead of the Dutch Grand Prix. It's always an amazing atmosphere.
It's one of the greats, isn't it? I mean, the Dutch love a DJ, and I don't know what the genre of music's technically called. It's not my...
EDM.
Sorry?
EDM.
They love it. They love that.
You should love it too.
Goes...
It's the best. I've never seen. When I was, studying Cambridge engineering, never did I think my office I would get Tiesto driving past as part of my work day.
Yeah.
And what a great... Yeah, I love it. But this
9 a.m. till 5 p.m.
I love it.
It feels like a lot to me, but they love it.
I've been dancing all weekend, and I will continue to dance. It's one of the best grids of the year, one of the best post races. Cannot miss it. Cannot miss it. Unless you hate EDM music, then maybe just watch the race.
Yeah, it might be one to watch on F1 TV if you're not a fan of EDM, but it is a really buzzing grid if impractical to make a pre-race show.
Has the wind picked up?
No, we don't see anything on the wind.
The replay that we just had was Russell going through Hugenholtz corner, turn 3, and it again looked like he carried loads of speed in and was fighting the car all the way to the exit. Hence the win question, and he was fighting the car as well on one of the earlier exits from turn 10.
Race control have noted that unsafe release that you saw on the replay.
So that unsafe release looked like a slam dunk. Albon being released into the path of, was it Stroll, coming out of the garage. But actually, when you're in the pit lane, because of the way the Aston Martin garage is, just behind the Williams crew, at the point of release, they wouldn't have necessarily known that the Aston Martin was coming out of the garage, and then Stroll charges out. The actual release might have technically looked safe to the Williams team. I'm sure that's why it was as it was. Maybe Albon didn't accelerate so quick out, or they were just surprised that Aston Martin launched. So it might not even shock me if they get away with that one, as egregious as it looked.
You sound like me preparing a defence a couple of years ago here. It is, though, but it's right here. It is such a difficult one to be able to kind of time it. And then, in a free practice session, it's not like a race where everybody is doing a standard pit stop. There's a load of different things you can see as we're getting the onboards here.
Okay, so that was a different one. That was Zhou and Ricciardo. And actually looking at that, there was a very similar case. Ricciardo coming out of the garage, Zhou in the pits. But actually Ricciardo, I think, was in the fast lane as Zhou was released. So it's all things to have a look at for the stewards.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that's actually really easy to get kind of fall into habit. So in 2022, Alpha came P6, and the Mercedes, didn't win the championship. And actually, I remember nearly getting my team an unsafe release because I was so surprised by how fast the Mercedes got to me, because I was so used to having about 20 seconds from when it was released to get to me, instead of about 5 when they were a little bit closer.
The stresses you have when you're on the pit wall mid-Grand Prix. Okay, let's dive now into the data. George Russell compared to Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, so this is what teams are looking at right now, live on Pit Walls, bringing to you guys at home. And this is a speed trace comparison between our two fastest drivers, Russell and Piastri. And you can see where they're winning and losing against each other. Again, it's not across the whole lap that George is faster. It is the biggest chunk, about a tenth, is through that high-speed turn 7, that sweeping right-hander, where McLaren, if it had a weakness, let's not really call it a weakness, let's say it's the one thing it's not completely excellent at, is the high-speed corners. They brought the upgrade, and it looks like, at least right now, that's the area that they're struggling a touch. But it's so close. You know, if you're looking at these numbers, it's absolute tiny margins here. That could be something like, you know, 5 kilograms of fuel, for example. Doesn't tell the fuel story, but allows us as teams to try to understand where we may be strong, where our competitors may be weak, or vice versa.
The speed in the high speed is actually, I feel like that's quite a big difference to lose a 10th in a high speed corner, because it's one of the strange things that seems obvious once you explain it, but it's easier to find time in a low-speed corner than a high-speed corner because you spend less overall time. The drivers flash through a high-speed corner, whereas the low-speed, you're in the corner for much longer. So to actually lose a full 10th in what is a corner that's a feather, a half lift, that's quite a lot, and it's something consistent for McLaren. Last year they were losing to Verstappen. Earlier on we saw them losing to Verstappen as well, and now it's Mercedes that are considerably quicker. The rest of the lap you can see is bits here or there, and McLaren looked particularly good later on in the change of direction at 11 and 12, where there's a 0.068 gain.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Even though the Red Bull across the lap with Max is nearly 0.3 slower, they are 7 kph down compared to the McLaren. So that high speed is still going to be their kind of weakest thing, which means if it's raining, they're going to be quick.
Great to go through that and get the comparison between the top two of all the qualifying simulations. We are a long way now into the long runs. As we see Yuki Tsunoda, who managed to get himself in the mix in 7th position on the soft tyre. He's now running the hard tyre that Ruthie thought looked quite promising out of the box earlier on.
You just call me Ruthie. Quite liked it.
Ruth? I thought I just called you Ruth.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you guys to it.
I mean,
actually, at the moment here, all 3 compounds.
I might have done. There's definitely moments on the mic where I've said things that I haven't intended in the last 10 years.
All 3 compounds are actually looking relatively similar degradation right now, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the same on Sunday, because wind dominates degradation. We're looking for really rather small numbers, something in the order of about a 10th really around here, depends on the year and depends on the conditions. But the kind of the noise in the data because of these wind conditions is actually right now masking the difference between these 3 compounds, which is annoying for the teams, great for us, because it means that when we go into the race on Sunday, when we're expecting that wind to drop right down to kind of just a normal breeze, rather than making me look like I have been going through a hedge backwards every single time they seem to want to put me on the broadcast.